let me just, we'll start out by introducing our panel today. I'm Andrew Goble. I am the Information Security Officer at Dixie State University and the team lead for the USHE internal penetration testing team. And I'll have my compatriots up here introduce themselves so you guys will know who you're talking to.
I'm Alan Hill. I'm from Utah State University. I'm on the Enterprise Security and Systems team up there, and I've been on the USHE team for several years now.
Dustin Udy with the University of Utah. I'm a security assessment team lead up there. Been doing the pen testing with Andrew on the USHE team since, well, about 10 years now. So.
Matt Zufeld, I'm the CIO at Southern Utah University, and I'm not part of the penetration testing team, but members from our institution are.
Matt's also part of the body that allegedly governs us, so we wanted to have him on here as a kind of a representative of leadership and their support for this process. So just a couple of things about this panel that we hope you take away. We kind of want to talk a little bit about the history of this process, how we got into what we do, how it works, some of the things that we've found over the years, and then get into kind of what the net effect of this has been throughout the years that we've been doing this, what we've seen at institutions that have been participating in this, and where we think this will go in the future. As we go through the panel, we're going to talk, but if there's questions, jump up, ask your question, or you want a little more detail on something that we're doing. We are going to very generically go into a little bit of detail on some of the things we've done in the past at some institutions. We're not going to out anybody or name names necessarily unless it's our own institution. But a little bit of story time while we're at this, because we've had a lot of fun doing this process in the past several years. So let me just kind of lay out what this team is and what we do. In the mid 2000s, the CIOs group, the CIOs at all 8 public institutions in the state of Utah and the state board of regents had some concerns about the security of networks and systems at Utah's higher education institutions. And so they commissioned a kind of an ad hoc team from UEN and some of the other schools to go out and do some pest testing, and the results were really, really ugly. SAINTCON's own Jupiter was part of that. I could start dropping a lot of names: Corey Roach, Patrick Bergen, Kelly Genesee, for those of you who remember him, were involved in this team. And they kind of built the foundation for what we do now, so we need to tip our hats to them. And that process went, for I don't know, three or 4 years. It kind of was dependent on funding, whether or not it would be funded year to year. There were a couple of years where the institutions actually kind of had to pay for that to happen. But it was, what it did is it exposed that there were some real problems. At that point in time, again, this is about 15 years ago, very few of the institutions had a dedicated information security office. So there's just nobody driving the boat. And so there was a lot of immaturity in the system, so to speak. And so, the other thing that I think is probably, I think I'll kick this over to Matt to kind of discuss a little bit, was this process was so new. There was a lot of hostility and attitude towards that process. People didn't understand why this was happening. They were very comfortable in their lanes. And I don't know, why don't you kind of share SUU's experience on that?
Right. So as we began this process and we had these outside individuals come in to do the security assessment, what we found quickly was an internal attitude of antagonism. It was a very adversarial relationship to begin with. Those coming in to do the pen test, I mean, realistically, they were there for our benefit, right? All the results were for our own good, but it was very much seen as adversarial, and they were the outsiders, they were the enemy, and at all costs avoid. So much so that even conversations between our internal staff and the assessment team that had come on site, every single conversation was treated as suspect. Is this conversation nothing more than just a social engineering attack, right? Are they trying to get information out of us, that kind of a thing? Whereas, you know, that's a huge missed opportunity. The reality is these are people that are coming as friendly assessors, and all the results that come out of this assessment are for our own benefit, our own improvement. But for a while there, that was very much the way it was. It was so adversarial that the team would go in a room, they would, you know, put papers up on the windows and so that our staff couldn't see what they were doing, vice versa. And it very much became an us versus them type of a relationship. That, as time went on and we kind of got past that, people started to accept that, hey, this is for our own benefit, that the team would leave with this fantastic report that detailed all the things that needed to be fixed. We worked on that over the coming year or two until the next assessment and started improving our security posture. We quickly began to realize that, you know what, there's benefit in this. Andrew has done an amazing job at taking the team to that next level where they work very hard to make sure that they're working with us, not against us. And this is, you know, I mentioned this early on, but the reality is we continue to see this from time to time. So as our staff changes, and we have a new member of the staff that's going through one of these assessments for their first time, I've noticed a pattern of that same nervousness, you know. Here comes the bad guys, steer clear. Don't say anything to them, don't feed them information, that kind of a thing. So it has required a little bit of an educational process internally, reminding the staff that this is a friendly group. Yes, they're here to pick holes in the system. They're trying to find and exploit anything that they can, but it's for our own benefit. Much better to have them do that than some, you know, malicious intent person out on the internet or whatever. And so as we work through that, then it becomes this nice collaborative relationship. One of the things that I've really appreciated the last few years, and we had our last assessment just, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, time moves on quickly, but they were very open door, and they allowed members of my staff to come in, sit down, and spend any amount of time that they wanted with them, and they were happy to detail what they were working through. Andrew mentioned that in the early days, you know, it was, and I don't want to steal your thunder too much here, but it was trivial things. The findings were, frankly, low-hanging fruit. We had not looked into this type of assessment before. Security was a relatively new concept, and so that, you know, the things that were being discovered were not that difficult to fix once we knew about them. As we move forward, frankly, the institutions are getting a lot better with their security. And some of the best assessments we've had lately, we've gone from the red team, blue team thing to more of a purple team type arrangement, where we can sit down together and say, look, we're going to detect you over and over and over. You know, you're doing this, we see you, stop doing it, we block you. You come another direction, we see you, you block it. Let's work together instead and say, okay, we acknowledge that this detection is working, we've seen it. What if we get past that? What are the vulnerabilities that are still out there? Let's work together.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And as I mentioned earlier, we kind of had this ad hoc process in the beginning, and partially because of this kind of hostility or restlessness among the institutions. You know, about 10 years ago, there was kind of a desire to let's rein this thing in. Let's try and apply some methodologies to it. And you know, of course, this is higher education. So what's the first thing we do? We form a committee. And I got asked to lead that committee, ergo here I still am. But I think one of the things that came out of that committee was it was understood there was value in the process, and leadership understood that. And so kind of two things came out of this, that I think are important that have made this a consistent process. Number one, it was funded. For the last 10 years, we've had a solid source of funding to make this process happen. And it's that funding has been constant. If the funding were to dry up, this process would stop. And then the second thing was we had buy-in from IT leadership. All of the CIOs for each of these institutions are bought into this process, and you know, whether their entire staffs are or not, they're bought in and it happens. And so those are, I think, two of the most important things that kind of happened at about that 9-10 years ago mark, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And so the model that we settled on was a biennial model, meaning that basically about every 2 years, our team is going to show up at your institution. We do four institutions every fiscal year, and we've been able to sustainably fund that and put that together. So just talk a little bit about kind of what this looks like, and I'm going to kick this over to Al and Dustin to kind of explain what an assessment looked like, and especially kind of back in the early days, because I think in the early days of this process, especially when a lot of that low-hanging fruit was still there, some of the stuff that we were able to find, and I'll have these guys kind of elaborate on what 5 dudes in a conference room can do when they're left to their own devices. So.
Working? Yeah. Okay. So, well, one thing to touch about the team real quick. You know, we have five members of the security teams from that make up from all the different institutions. Not all of them participate or send a member. So, almost every assessment, it's for the most part 5 different people, except Andrew. He's pretty much static, except at his own school. Then we just kind of lock him out. So you really get a good variety of skill sets and ways of thinking. Some of the team members are really great at Active Directory. Some are good at web. Some are good at just doing nefarious things at a command line or searches, custom scripts and stuff like that. So that's been a real key too. It's just having different members from the different schools participate, and it's built a huge camaraderie between all the different schools and the members. But some of the early stuff, we tried to really focus on like the CIS controls, because we needed a framework and a kind of a benchmark to set things to. Some of the schools, it wasn't as important, or they just didn't see the value in some of it. Some schools, I mean, they have a book that they keep that their board of regents signs off on. They look through it, and they're really, really engaged with that. And some of that's kind of changed. We were really focused on the MITRE ATT&CK framework, so in our reports, we try to show what we did, how we did it, and ways to protect against someone else doing it as well. That seems to be really helped out. Yeah, and then, like the low-hanging fruit stuff. I mean, we were finding machines unlocked, or we would just go steal some machines that were just kind of kicking around, take it back to the conference room where we had full control, do whatever we wanted to it, put it back. Nobody ever bothered to ask. Put up rogue access points, just wander around, and we still kind of walk around with some evil twins to see what we can get away with. Look under keyboards. I mean, there was just a lot of old bad habits that we would just come across. We used to really focus on physical security, an open window, an open door, or we would make our own ways in, picking locks, popping doors. A lot of, and that's some of that. The physical stuff has changed. Yeah, there's overall, there's been a lot of change. Things getting more secure, people coming up with baselines, really kind of falling into standards. So, Al, what do you got?
I guess I could talk about a little bit about the actual process. We usually have a launch meeting with the institution, and then we'll go live with about 3 weeks of external, kind of like we got day jobs too, so this is kind of in our spare time. We're trying to, do some recon and some external probing, any web vulnerabilities and stuff like that for about 3 weeks. And then we go on site for a full week. And in the past, I was like really a no holds barred. And a lot of times I'd leave that up to the institution. Like, what do you guys want to see? A lot of times they'd give us a green light for anything goes. You can do physical, you can maybe stay away from this office or something, but very little guidelines. Yeah, and in the past, like these guys are saying that we'd walk in and like every campus had like Eternal Blue or something easy that you could get in, move laterally and escalate up, and that was kind of the capture the flag. Back in the day was domain admin, and more often than not they came away with it, and we had some physical capture the flag. Can we get in the data center? You know, and over the years, what's been really cool and of value to us is that cross-knowledge transfer of seeing what other institutions are doing well, and then taking that knowledge back to our own institution and say, like, the stuff we have success with at other places, we're like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh crap, would this work on my own campus? And then we take that back. Not only are we leaving them with a report and kind of a laundry list of things that they can do to improve their things, but all of us are taking those same notes back to our own institutions and same laundry list and looking at the stuff that we've got and the vulnerabilities we have, and you know, and applying to that to our own respective places as well.
So I mentioned the adversarial relationship at the beginning, and you know, part of what these guys were just talking about jogged a memory. One of the first, maybe the first or second test that we had done on our site, I guess the initial approach was you get in there and you Nessus scan all the things to see what's out there, right? Well, if those of you have used Nessus in the past, if you're not careful, it can get a little bit messy. Network segmentation was not a thing that was implemented at the time, and so they had, you know, carte blanche access to every device on the network. The Nessus scan promptly found a very specific example here, found a printer in our registration area or registrar's office that was used to print the official transcripts. Said printer has very special, pricey paper loaded in it, and of course they print lots of them, so it's the 500 sheet paper tray, right, stocked to the top. Nessus Scan starts just dumping junk out on these transcript pages. The folks in the registrar's office are completely ignorant to the fact that this assessment is going on, so all they know is their printer is just printing garbage. Prints through the paper tray, and you know, it hasn't stopped, so we got to get this to stop. We reload the paper tray so we can get the buffer cleared, right, and we go through more paper. This created years worth of ill will toward this assessment team. We explained to the registrar's office what was going on. This is a controlled environment, you know, everything else, and they were so upset about the lost expense there with that transcript paper that for years to come, the assessment team would come in and the shackles, you know, the hackles would come up immediately. They're just like, you keep them away from us. Positive outcome from this, and if anybody's considering doing something similar, communication is key. So lessons were learned. The communication between our institution and each of the institutions participating and the assessment team has been, you know, taken up to a 10. We have a lot more communication, and we're able to say, okay, we've got a sensitive area over here, leave it alone. Or we know that we want to investigate over here, but there could be fallout, let's circle those people in, and so that they're aware. Communication is key.
I would agree with that. And one of the things, too, is as this process has matured, is we've gotten to the point, you know, 10, 15 years ago, just the institutions had no clue what was going on their networks. Now, we can show up and Matt can say, look, you got to stay away from this printer. We know it's a problem. You don't need to test it for us again, because we know. And that, again, kind of comes back into that communication element. But, you know, for example, we've done a lot of physical penetration testing, and at one institution, we always have what's called a get-out-of-jail-free card. I mean, some of you are professional pen testers and you're not impressed, but you got to have that in your pocket, and especially if you're doing physical pen tests. Dustin, one time at an institution, tailgated somebody in through a door and kind of wandered around, and then we went to lunch, and we had the director of security for that institution in our conference room after lunch, and he was hot. Really, really, really hot. And that took some smoothing over to get that sorted out. But one of the things that we did, again, in this communication element is as we sit down with IT leadership and we start setting this up, if there was going to be a physical penetration testing element, we're like, hey, you got to tell your campus security people that we're here, because the last thing we want to do is get tased. And we'll show a little on this in a second. But I mean, we've kind of let physical go by the wayside. But let me just use a couple illustrations. Early on, kind of back to that low-hanging fruit, and it just varies institution to institution. Sometimes you have the facilities management people taking care of like the locks and the camera system. Sometimes it's IT. But there's been instances where we have, Al's got this really cool white Sprinter van, and we've sat in the white Sprinter van in the parking lot at night. We've turned off the camera system. We have the door system. We're pushing the easy button to open doors, and we just go in. But one of the things that's happened is as we've done that, and as we've showed facilities people and locksmiths that, hey, you're intertwined with IT, and I know you're a lock shop or you're a door access shop, but you're also an IT shop now, and you've got to be cognizant of that. We've seen market improvements where they've either secured that system or they've buried it in several layers of segmentation and defense, so that you've got to go through a two-factor gateway or something before you can get to the lock system. Don't just hit the easy button to open doors. And that's a good example of things that have improved over time. I think network segmentation is another. It's not universal yet, but from the old days where it was just crunchy outer shell and really squishy in the middle, a lot of institutions have really matured past that model, and now we're finding segmentation or even micro segmentation when we get in, to the point where we hit a network and we can't move around in it. The one thing I always bring this up as just a huge win is, if you can block the SMB ports across the network so that you can't traverse through a Windows environment, you've made life so much harder for an attacker. We talk about the glory days a little bit. Probably the glory days were PowerShell Empire having several hundred agents on a network, and yeah, by day two. And we try to have fun with the process, when we don't do this much anymore because we don't see this much anymore, but when we'd get domain admin, the next day we'd bring donuts into the staff. And they knew that if we came in with a box of donuts, it probably wasn't good. So, let me just, and this is Matt, so he and I can tell this story together. But
so before he shows this video, little bit of background here. When we started this process, physical security was one of those other things that really wasn't thought about. The data center had a lock on it. That was pretty much it. It was keyed to the same keys as everything else on campus, right? And so the team quickly pointed out to us the fallacy of the ways, and that needed to be corrected. So we went to great efforts to tighten up security. The data center now has, the electronic access controls. It has the magnetic locks. It has request to exit. It has, all the things. The IT space that is before the data center is now locked down. You can't just wander up there any hour of the day or the night. Cameras have been installed. The alerts have been put on the cameras such that if there's motion detected after hours, it can send out email alerts. And you got that queued up?
Well, I was first going to show this. This is a picture of happy pen testers. They are inside a data center. You may recognize a couple of those characters. I don't know, but those are happy pen testers. When you're on the inside of a data center, you feel good about life. So let me cue this video up.
This is after we went to the key shop. This is after we made the visit.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah, you should talk a little bit about the key shop.
All right,
Sorry,
so
I'm working backwards here.
Yeah, working backwards. So Dustin's got a valid point here. So significant efforts were made to secure the data center, right? The one huge security hole that was overlooked, I mean, this is a big enough hole to drive a Mack truck through, is exactly what was mentioned just a minute ago. We've got other people managing those systems. So we had good security on the data center. We have great security on the IT space. What we didn't have was great security on the lock shop.
Yeah, let me have Dustin tell you just a little bit about how that worked.
Well, as I remember it, Andrew and I were casing the outside of the barbed wire fence, trying to figure out how we were going to hop the fence late at night, when one of our cohorts that was in the photo there had already gone inside because the door was open. So he just walked to the front door right around 5 o'clock, walked in the back, and then hollered from the other side, "Hey guys, come inside." So we went inside, and we're just kind of snooping around, opening drawers. Andrews, I think, sat down at the computer, moved the mouse, and, well, it wasn't locked. So it's like, oh, the application's right there.
I learned how to program cards.
Yeah.
Took me about 45 minutes.
Yeah. We got to be quick on our feet. We're well-rounded IT folks, so Andrew crash coursed it, found a
They
whole
had a
drawer.
manual. It was right there on the desk.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. Nothing's locked up, handful of key fobs. So, we program a few for the IT suite, and then we walk over there. This particular night was kind of funny because we walked up outside. We saw some lights on upstairs. We kind of thought that they were trolling us because some of them knew we were on site now. We get a little loud, by day 2 or 3, and everybody by then knows we're there somewhere. And so we kind of sneak up the floor to the top, and all of a sudden we see kids upstairs. And we're like, we're not alone. So we hurry and take off, and someone was doing like a Boy Scout troop, show and tell or something. And we scatter out in the darkness. Some people are hiding behind trees. We're just chilling, looking very suspicious, like who just sits in the dark. They kind of troll off, and so then it's our turn, and that kind of goes to where the video is.
Yeah. So let's cue the video. This is good stuff. Pentesters come out of the elevator. Pentesters see Boy Scouts. We decide to bail out. Boy Scouts leave. Oh, snap. Uh-oh. We kind of gave up physical pen testing after that. No, just kidding.
So funny story about this. This particular test was intended to be done in the blind. So the pen test team showed up on site. We did not tell campus that they were coming, with 2 exceptions. My boss and the chief of police. Chief of police did give a heads up to his officers, and so they were a little bit suspicious to begin with, but the cameras, the motion alerts worked as expected, triggered. There's people on the floor when there shouldn't be. A response is initiated, so numerous people get video clips or stills and a video clip and alerts. Knowing, after seeing the video clip, knowing that this was the assessment team and not a real threat, I thought, okay, we're going to carry this through and see it through like if it were real, but we know that campus police is in on the assessment, so we won't have quite the response, right? So I call the campus police number with one huge oversight. It's after hours. After hours, the campus police number forwards to local police dispatch because nobody's in the office. So my phone call, I'm thinking I'm talking to campus police. It's already in on what's going on, but no, I'm talking to dispatch, and that's why you saw the response that you did. So we had not only campus police officers, but city police as well. Funny story that goes with that, one of my staff was across town at a shopping area watching a couple of police officers that were interrogating, what we gather, probably a potential shoplifter. He says he was just kind of watching them, and he recognized a couple of them, so he was walking over to talk to them. All of a sudden, they all jumped in their cars, and they took off. Guess where they were going? To get these guys.
To get the real criminals.
I don't think it showed in the video very well, but those guys were hot and sweaty. They ran up. They didn't take the elevator up. They ran up the 4 flights of stairs, or however tall that building is, to get out there, and they weren't too happy to see us in there. They had no idea.
Yeah, and we didn't know that they were coming. So we were pretty surprised when the door opened and a whole lot of very upset police officers. They were ready. So I think Al and I and one of our other guys, we stayed in the data center. Like, no, I'm not coming out. You need to calm down. We're not coming out here before, So it was.
You got to come get us out.
Yeah. It was quite the surprise. I mean, it was the first time that we had been caught in the data center for sure. So it was a good response, but it's a little freaky and a little unnerving when the police show up. So.
Yeah, and thankfully we've never been tased, but the physical security is an interesting thing because there were some really awful low-hanging fruit. I mean, just awful, like doors you could open with pocket knives, and we think we've helped run most of that out, and we've gotten to the point where I think most of the institutions are to the point where they're like, probably our biggest physical risk is the USHE assessment team, and we probably covered most of our bases there, and so we've really tried to shift our focus to, what are your external risks, because that's where your real risk is. It's not somebody who's going to get into your data center at night. It's Vladimir in his pajamas in his mom's basement in the Ukraine who is your real threat, and how are you going to detect and protect against that threat. And so as this process has grown and kind of matured, we've seen, you've heard the old saw about rising tides raise all boats, and that's definitely been the case in the USHE system. Everybody's much better off than they were 10 or 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And we can't claim all the credit for that. There's been an awful lot of hard work, but it's kind of a every other year reminder of where you are at. We've had some challenges, with the pandemic. It kind of shut us down for several months, but we've been able to pick back up and carry on. So where are we as a system in 2021? Well, as it stands right now, we're, funding is solid, support is still there. I think most of the institutions, certainly their IT leadership and most of the technical folks see this as a net positive for somebody to come in and show them kind of where they're at. We have a ready-made roster of, and Al kind of alluded to this a little bit ago, we have a ready-made roster of basically internally homegrown penetration testing personnel who can go to another school and perform a pen test and then turn around and have that pen test done at their own school. And we've also developed the blue team capabilities of the schools themselves. One of the tactics that we kind of started adopting in the last couple rounds as we've worked with the IT leaderships at each school is, hey, do you want us to come in black or not? And we've had a few where we've come in black. They've put us in a conference room on the other side of campus. IT does not know we are there. And that's an interesting measurement. For those of you who are involved in penetration tests, if they know you're there, it's hypervigilance. The paper moved on their desk. it must have been us. Whereas, any random Tuesday, you could have done unspeakable things on their desk and they might not have noticed. So when they know you're there, there's that element of hypervigilance, and so we have done a few tests where it's been just black. They don't know we're there. If we can be quiet at least the first couple days before we send out a massive fish or something like that, then often you get a true measurement of just how on top of things or how good alerting or things like that are. And the institutions are better technically prepared now. So, but I think kind of the end result that we wanted to get out of this panel is we wanted to kind of present what we do. Now, again, some of you are professional pen testers. You're like, you guys are rank amateurs. We know that. We like to joke that sometimes we're Google testers before we're pen testers. How do we do that? But it's worked for the system, and it's been very cost effective for us. And it's also something that may work in an organization or in a consortium of organizations. I know there's other governmental or education institutions where you've got a consortium or a big enough pool of talent that you could probably draw from and implement a similar program. You've got to have IT leadership support. You got to fund it somehow. We kind of throw out a carrot of there's some additional compensation for the team members, and that keeps the team interested and willing to do it. But it's, go ahead, Al.
It's good. One of the things that came out for the U is being on the team for so long. I started seeing kind of a need at the University of Utah to have an internal assessment team. So that's my day-to-day job. I don't do so much pen testing as I do just security assessing. I go out, I work with departments, I spend quite a bit of time doing an overarching, architecture review, look at firewalls, look at vulnerabilities, look at all their networks, pretty much everything, and give them a fairly lengthy report of, hey, this is how you can improve your security internally, so that hopefully, when the team comes back, maybe that group gets picked, they're better off, So it can spin up an internal team in your organization, big or small. And so that's some of the things we want to hopefully kind of disseminate out to the crowd is, if your company's a decent size, maybe start looking at, spinning up your own team. Right now it's me, and that's a very large institution. Now I have a lot of, coworkers and colleagues that I can pull on for different resources when I need it, but for the most part, I'm a team of one. So, and I'm, I stay very busy. So, take that back to your companies as well, to have some internal focus. Because I've been there like a quarter century. I know where the skeletons are. I know where the bodies are buried. I know what groups do better than others. I can tell the leadership, hey, I know these people, I know this department. They may have a lot of risk, but they're doing a great job. Let's focus over here where there's maybe a little bit more low-hanging fruit, which you won't necessarily get from an outside pen testing team. It's nice to have some internal insight into an organization. So, if you're running a company, maybe consider that as well, having an internal team.
Yeah, we kind of blur that line between an external and an internal pen test team, because we are internal to our consortium or our system, the 8 schools together, but we're not necessarily internal to the institution that we're running a test on at any given moment. So as we've done this, though, we've seen the success, we've seen this rising tide basically kind of bring, and higher ed's an interesting animal to do security in as it is, but we have people with lots of letters behind their names and lots of opinions, and it just is what it is. But we're making progress, and this is a piece of that puzzle. So I think at this time maybe we'll entertain questions if there are any. Does anybody? One in the back. Stand up and yell, because you're clear back there and I'm deaf.
What's some of the most common things you guys see keep popping back
Okay, so question was common issues or things that we've seen over and over and over again. I'm going to have our resident evil man, Al Hill, tell you the probably number one thing.
So there was a presentation by Eva from the EFF a couple years ago at SAINTCON, and she said something. She got into this thing that was like, okay, we had this really sophisticated APT, and we were using buzzword after buzzword, blockchain, blah blah blah, and then she said, "Just kidding, it was a fish. It's always a fish," and it still is. I mean, there's our easiest foothold to get into an institution is still the end user. So, and that's a difficult one that we're all still dealing with and have been for many years. Like, as patch management's been getting better and all the vulnerabilities are getting better, it's still I think our weakest link is the end user and the social engineering part of it, attacking the weak point there. So.
From the internal side, what I've noticed the most is people don't know what they have. Like, I mean, CIS Control 1, asset management, people have no idea what's on their network. So we'll find something, at least for me at my institution, I'll find stuff and it's like, oh, I didn't know that was still here, right? So record keeping and asset management I've seen is a big problem, and old vulnerabilities that don't get remediated. There's a lot of basics that just get forgotten about. So, but the best way in is still a fish for us.
Yeah, I think to a lesser extent, Active Directory security is another one that we've seen